So the two topics for today, we're going to cover how we have actually modernized the use of root cause tools, techniques. And that's a big deal because everyone who has been taught root cause analysis in the past has been given a big toolkit and said, go, you're on your own, use these tools anywhere you want. And you know how poor those results are. And then two, we're going to talk about great rhino events and some very pointed thoughts of preventing predictable preventable events, which happen all the time, yet we are terrible at this. So I thought it's time to dust that off. I gave it once earlier last year already. But let me get into the modernization of the use of root cause analysis tools and techniques. And this is building on what I gave you last month. So I'm sorry for all the people that aren't here again for this month, but last month we mentioned these traditional tools that we've been using for a long time. And we're all quite familiar with all of these. In fact, the DOE teaches from their perspective and their accident analysis course. They basically do the events and causal factors timeline, they do change analysis, they do barrier analysis. The three of them separately, and that's what they call a root cause. Of course, there's so many other tools and techniques you can use. And so the problem with the way that root cause has been taught for a century, practically 5, 6, 7, 8 decades, is that you got a bag of tools, use them anywhere you want. That's crazy. And this is what I mean to clear up. And so just to cover, to pick up where we left off last time, I'll bring you up to speed again. So we've got tools dating all the way back to the 20s, control charts from the 20s, the barrier analysis, the premise for the Swiss cheese model is from the 30s, 5 whys is from the 30s, fishbone is from the 40s. So is failure modes and effect analysis, first created in the Army in the 40s. Pareto charts was sort of discovered by Duran looking into Pareto's work in the 1800s. Then we have task and change analysis in the 40s. The NTSB picked up and taught us events and causal factors charting from the 60s, which is still what they're teaching today, 60 years later. This is the main thing being taught by the Department of Energy. We have fault tree analysis developed for the Minuteman Missile Program in the 60s, and then that was extrapolated on and picked up by the Atomic Energy Commission, and they created MORT, which is a ton of fault trees. And as you heard me say last week, we don't use MORT and fault trees for people issues. People are the infinite variable. We don't want to be trying to pigeonhole the possibilities into a few elements here. That's what fault trees do for us. Even Lean Six Sigma. So they married Lean Six Sigma in 2002, but Lean came from the 40s. Six Sigma is from the 80s. And of course, they're talking about improving manufacturing processes. And when it came down to causal analysis, as you see at the bottom there, back to the fishbone and the 5 whys from the 30s and 40s. So that's where we left off last month. The fact that these tools have been put into toolboxes in various industries, and the DOE has its own set of tools. Lean Six Sigma has 100 tools. I showed you my book on that last time. I still have it here on my desk. So lots and lots of different tools, and you're on your own, basically. So what we're doing here is, for the first time, we are creating a system that lets you use any tool, bring it in, and to remind you from the basics of our, this is the HF exposure incident that we look at in the class in BD2. This is the last one, actually, that we have phase 1, which is all of this over here. Phase 1 is where we collect all the evidence that we can find about the incident, and we organize it in the way that we're used to with some of these other tools. And for example, we have the timelines, right, which is the formation of an events and causal factors charts. But we also brought in the line of defenses, which is how you formulate barrier analysis, task analysis, change analysis, comparative timeline analysis. And all those do is they compare the requirements against what actually happened, the timelines, and we're doing all of those analyses, and it's already built in here and integrated. So some of these key tools are here. Notice that we talk about 5 whys, and it's no longer 5, but We use cause and effect sequences to get to the root causes. Five whys is a technique for asking Socratic questions. It is not a root cause methodology. I hope you've learned that throughout this course by now. And the fish bones, if you like the fish bones, well, here are the bones in the fish bone. We call them themes. And you can have as many themes as you like. You can create your own themes. But basically, most of the tools that you've thought about, I've thought about and used and liked and integrated. Now, today I want to focus on this, the actual data analysis tools. And you notice that I put them up here often, and then there's a space off to the right to do as many of these as possible, to bring in as many as you need. And that's what I like to focus on today. So, but again, to show you a good example, we're going to bring in one of our industry cases. This is a emergency diesel failure at a nuclear site. And once again, we have the basic construct. You notice it looks exactly how we teach it. But now off to the right, we've made use of that space for a lot of data analysis. So if you look here, once again, we have the granularity of timelines. We have the defenses. We start to develop questions from the analysis of defenses. We also have a big section on equipment interface because this was basically an equipment failure. We have lots of photographs, and you notice all of the questions coming from the photographs. You notice that phase 2 is already well under development, and even phase 3, so this is next to finished. But let's take a look over here and notice that we've got some charts and graphs. We have another different type of analysis. This is a support refute exercise that this organization decided to do. Here it is. You can park whatever you want over here, no problem. Here, because if it's an equipment issue, I encourage them to map out all the possibilities. So here we go. This is one giant fault tree, but notice that it's broken up into like one segment here, and then it continues here, then it continues here. So it was too big to fit under one giant one. So they well, with linkages we broke it up. And here is some process maps of failure sequences. And this is, once again, infinitely expandable. If you would like to bring in additional tools, no problem. You can bring in all the Lean Six Sigma tools in the world, analyze them, but understand how Bluedragon information flows. That's where I wanted to leave you with today. Phase 1 is all about gathering all of this evidence and analyzing all of that data, all of the available data. Data can be organized in 100 different ways. Anything quantifiable, Pareto charts. We have fault trees for equipment issues. We have process maps. You see them here. Any variations on those apply. And what are we doing? Remember that everything we do in phase 1, anybody remember what the output is, right? Questions, lines of inquiry questions. So the idea is everything we do in phase 1, which we call critical thinking, the gathering, organizing, and analyzing of evidence to generate lines of inquiry questions. Everything that we do in phase 1 is to get insights on performance that we turn into questions. We get insights from the sequence of events and what happened, analyzing the sequence of events against the requirements. We get insights from the human interface with the equipment, from the fault trees, from the process maps, from the Pareto charts, from any other analysis. If you remember other examples, we've talked about earned value management system charts, organizational development charts. Anything goes in phase 1. The idea is to look for performance insights, specifically negative performance. Why negative performance? One word answer: symptoms. Boy, I can't draw with this thing, right? Symptoms. We're looking for symptoms. Symptoms are the manifestation of the event, and we're going to reverse engineer our way back from the symptoms to the sources, the root causes. That's why this is so important. All right. So there in a nutshell is a big picture of how we have all this information brought to bear, and we bring it to bear on phase two so that we can do our focus groups with the right affected parts of the organization. And from there, we can start to see how the common causes played out, which ones are significant. This is the significant contributing factor line. This is the root cause line. And then we take all those issues down here into phase three. All right. So we wanted to keep hammering on this concept because no one up to this point, no methodology up to this point has done this level of integration. They teach you all of the tools separately, the events and causal factors, the barriers, the fault trees, the process mapping. Everything is taught separately. And that was my frustration because now I'm doing this starting maybe 20 years ago. I was doing this for a living and decided this is not working, not efficient enough. I definitely need to enhance it, integrate it, make it more efficient, lean it out, if you will, make it more agile. And this is how Bluedragon evolved over time. So let me stop there and ask for questions, comments, thoughts.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking for something that I can hand to someone that's maybe 2, 3, 4 pages max, simple slides like the first couple slides in the presentation you had today, just as part of my pitch to say, hey, I know you understand how to do causal analysis. I think this is something, Bluedragon, something you should get trained on, and this is why. And it just very, very basically
Sounds good.
hammers home the point of, here are all the tools that you know how to do, but you're never really taught how best to use them. And therefore, here's the Bluedragon methodology. And this is how it incorporates pretty much every one of those tools in a nice organized manner. And you can see the relationship between the data that you gather from each one of those tools. So, I mean, this presentation is getting closer, but I guess the one part that I didn't see in this specific presentation was something that just very clearly highlighted that, hey, like you spoke, it incorporates the themes from the fishbone. It incorporates the barrier analysis.
I have that slide.
Okay, yeah. So,
What it's called what is integrated. The problem with that, and I rather show the big chart. The problem with
Mhm.
that is the slide simply has the bullet list of all the things that are integrated,
Yeah, I
and
think
you
if you
have to
had,
believe us.
well, no, so that's why I think if you had a slide that showed, the Bluedragon template, I'll call it, and then just something that highlights, okay, here is where your timeline is, here is where the equivalent of your barrier analysis is. Here are your fishbone themes. Something that just walks and points it out to them so they can see it. Because then to me, it's no longer believe me, it's there. They can see it right on the screen.
The slide that you're talking about, I call it my first principles thinking slide. I'm going to throw it up now. I'm not sure it's small enough to put into a PowerPoint slide, but
Right.
here's what we've done. So I show in this particular slide not only that I've taken events and causal factors chart and the others, but I've kept the green boxes and I've deleted the inefficiencies in the red boxes. And I show how, okay, here are the timelines from the ENCF chart. Here is the analysis of defenses, which came from the barrier analysis table. Here is how we also do comparative timeline task and change analysis. Here are the themes from the fishbone. Here are the lines of inquiry where we start traditional interviews, but we changed up the paradigm of how to do that. Here's the 5 whys. So this is probably what you mean, something like this that
Yes.
shows on a chart how we've incorporated all of that. And if you see how big this chart is, it might not look so good in a PowerPoint
Right.
slide, but I could give it a shot to try to make this with the bigger boxes and basic construct of the chart. So if you think this is useful, I will work on this.
I think so. And maybe the rest of the group can chime in, but I can see how you just have the template, and then on one slide you just show, okay, here are the elements of the event and causal factor chart. Then the next
Yeah.
slide, here's where the elements of the barrier analysis. So you don't necessarily have to squeeze it all onto one slide. You can
Okay.
walk it through. That might be a way to get around that.
I will give you that.
Yeah.
I'll give you
Because
that.
then to me,
Sounds
that's
great.
something that I think is basic enough that at least I can send out to the community of people who already know and are using the basic tools, say, hey, I think here's something better. because I'd
Thank
love
you,
to
Scott.
post that on our causal analysis SharePoint site. So anybody that goes
Uh-huh.
there looking for the traditional tools, I can have your advertisement there.
Let me go to
Thanks, Rob.
Barbara and then John. Barb, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is about the timeline. I've been using the Bluedragon or trying to on some continuous improvement projects. So maybe this has been happening since COVID, or maybe it's been happening since the last few years because of this big turnover in employees. But it seems like in some of these continuous improvement deals that the timeline is, in my opinion, which I may be wrong, which I want you to correct me if that's right, it's kind of dispensable. So I've kind of skipped it a few times because I didn't feel there was value in it. So am I missing something by doing that?
Not at all. The timeline, that section can be replaced with what I call performance lines. Doesn't have to be a sequence of events. It could be any kind of performance or evidence.
Okay.
And we've used a mix of the two as well. But let me say this, when I do a proactive program review, there is no event, there is no sequence of events, there's no timeline. The timeline is completely absent. But I can bring in performance data points. Negative performance data points are preferable because they're symptoms. Does that answer your question, Barbara?
It does. Perfect. Thank you. And actually, it gives me a label for those performance indicators.
Yes, nice. There you go. The more we talk about this, especially in these forums, and it goes back and reinforces what it is that you're doing, because one thing is taking a class, another thing is trying to implement what you've learned in the real world. The more we can show you, the more we give you examples of how it is implemented in the real world, I think the better off we are. That's why we have these refresher training sessions every month. John, over to you.
Oh, that was a great recap of the Bluedragon integrated problem solving system. One of the things I just want to throw out there for everybody, I think it's really important just to understand it. It's a system. It's not a tool. It's not a methodology. But what I really love about it is literally how it's systems agnostic, and it's very inclusive. Whatever you have, whatever you've been trained on, whatever you see that you like, you can incorporate it where it fits. And that slide that Rob showed, the first principles thinking, what's really beautiful about that is it shows a lot of very common tools that a lot of quality assurance and safety and causal analysis experts use. But what's really cool about it specifically, like it tells you what's good about it, like in the green, and then in the red, it tells you the gaps. But what a lot of people don't understand, they blindly use these tools because that's what they were trained on, but they don't understand what the gaps actually cause in the totality of the entire investigation. So when you start using these tools and you don't address the gaps in the tools, that's where you get these holes, and the holes are going to line up and allow events to continue to occur until you actually address those gaps, or unless you're lucky and the gaps don't line up. But what's super cool about the Bluedragon the system is it's very systematic. And if you follow it, you're going to literally be able to address each of those gaps and the biases and come out with a very, very rigorous conclusion. So that's something I just want to throw out there, Rob. Thank you.
One of our favorite sayings, I think you heard us say over and over, follow the process. The process works. Right? Follow the rubric. We've given you a lot of rubrics, paradigm shifts. And if you stick to it and don't allow the influence of senior leadership or the alphas in the room to sway you, make them follow the process. Don't get ahead of yourselves. Follow through with everything you can in phase one before you dive in to the focus groups in phase two. It works. We've proven it over and over.